If you don't already know, the ProRes RAW is a new codec from Apple, which allows for raw video compression. What's great about it is that it has smaller file sizes than the ProRes 422, and it's a 12-bit codec, not a 10-bit codec as all the 422s that we already have. So out of your image, you can get the highest amount of info possible, meaning dynamic range and color depth, and have it in a smaller file size as well. The Sony a7S III also gives ProRes RAW out of the camera on an external recorder. For these tests, we use our Atomos Ninja 5. What you should also know about the ProRes RAW is that it's supported by Final Cut, Avid Media Composer, and Adobe, but it's currently not supported by DaVinci, which for me is a pretty big blow. So this is great news, isn't it? Or is it? So let's proceed with the tests and see what we get. The noise in the ProRes RAW is more grainy and more colored. I can see small magenta and green, maybe, grains. It draws much more attention than the colorless gray noise from the XAVCSI. You can see the noise patterns in these two codecs becoming increasingly different, starting with ISO 800. So basically what should happen, if you look in the metadata for the ProRes RAW file, it will tell you that the setting on the Ninja 5 was S-Log3, so we will match the signal that was coming out from the camera. For this particular clip, the recording was done simultaneously, both in and out of the camera. So what I should have when I put the raw to log conversion here to this guy, I should have something that is of the same kind of contrast and saturation as this one. But watch what happens if I press the Panasonic V-Log. Doesn't it look closer to this guy than this guy to this guy? Okay, you're gonna say, well, this is a bit more contrasty and a bit more saturated, maybe just a little bit than this one. So this guy actually looks more flat. And let's just, for safety, let's just go through all of them. So this is the C-Log. These guys look quite similar as well. This is DJI, this isn't bad. The Nikon is off, so that's off the plate. So I would call this a good match between these two. This is something else that happens, like if you look at this in general, I should have the raw to camera conversion and now I just have the LUT. So if I deselect this and select it again, then you know I get the raw to LUT conversion. So I'm going to this one and I do the conversion to this. And now I move it to Panasonic. And the flatness difference is much bigger than in the shot that we saw before. So I'm gonna say that compared, you know, between this one and this one, it is a pretty big difference. And the Panasonic V-Log is much closer to the internal codec, right? So we're gonna try Canon C-Log as well. This guy, who's supposed to be the best, is kind of the worst match. So this one is actually underexposed by quite a bit, right? And now we're gonna go to the correct one technically. This was an attempt to grade them. These are the settings that I used. So I tried to force as much detail out as possible. And even though there is a bit of color noise here, you can see much, well, kind of more detail here. I'm gonna try to play it. Oh, it hates me so much. This is just kind of a blotch. This still holds some detail even though it's very noisy. Now I'm gonna go back to the ProRes RAW and see how much I can recover if I press the Panasonic V-Log. Am I gonna have more detail if I go back and try to regrade this? If it's really underexposed, then use the Sony S-Log. The log curves of Canon C-Log, Panasonic V-Log, and Sony S-Log3 are quite similar. In fact, for correct exposure and underexposure, the C-Log and S-Log are virtually the same. The V-Log diverges significantly from the S-Log in underexposure, which is what we saw in the underexposed last bit of footage. In conclusion, I'm not sure that I would use Apple ProRes RAW out of a Sony a7S III. I really like the XAVCSI, the best internal codec of the camera. You can definitely tell the difference between these two if you scale up your image, if you pay a lot of attention, but I'm more comfortable with how the noise looks from the internal recording of the camera than what the noise pattern looks like from the ProRes RAW if the footage is underexposed. What I would be interested to know, if you guys have any footage, is how much you can recover from the highlights as opposed to the internal codec of the camera, which is something that unfortunately we didn't look at when we had the camera. Thank you for watching this. If you like it, please subscribe.